Now, last year I grew probably about 30 kilos worth of just sourced tomatoes alone. And this year I have just topped over about 60 kilos, and it's growing from the same amount of area, same amount of fish, and the same amount of fish feed. So if you guys are curious about how I've actually managed this, then keep tuned and I'll go through what I have done to make these suckers grow so much better. Now, one thing that I want to say before I go through all the stuff that I've done is that none of this is necessary. If you guys just want to have some fish out the back that's pumping through a fish tank, tomatoes will grow just fine. And it's not going to die, it's not going to go anything bad if you don't do any of this, but I like to tinker and this has worked fantastically for me. So I'm going to take you guys along and show you guys what I've done, and it's up to you if you want to do it yourself. Now, the very first thing that I would recommend is to look at one of my older videos, which I'll have popping up in a little thingy here. It basically goes through the pruning techniques that I've been using, and you get a hell of a lot more produce out of these ones. But it's not just the pruning that I've been doing. I have been playing with nutrients, which is something that I haven't really done before. Now, when we talk about nutrients in aquaponics, then the basics that we get are these little guys here. So, fish feed, that is the basis of our nutrients. So everything that goes into our system pretty much comes out of this stuff here. So all the potassium, all the nitrogen, all of those sort of things that come out will come out of our fish food. So we are limited by what is in our fish food about what sort of stuff that we can grow. Now, hydroponic growers have got this down to a very, very fine art. So we don't really need to reinvent the wheel because we know what works, we know what works very well, and we know that we can make it work inside of our aquaponic systems, which is freaking awesome. But what we need to do is control the nutrient levels, which might sound kind of tricky, but it's honestly not that hard. And when I'm talking about nutrient levels, the main one that I found that I needed to add is potassium. Now, if you have a look at one of these charts that I've got scrolling along here, it goes through the best nutrient profiles for tomatoes, which is what I've been focusing on and what I've been trying to grow a hell of a lot of this season. Now, if you have a look at this chart, you'll see that potassium is sitting around 200 marks, so 200 parts per million. Now, at the beginning of the season, it starts a little bit lower, and then towards the end of the season, it starts to raise up a little bit higher. And using this, it helps build up the cell walls of the plant and just encourages fruiting a hell of a lot more than you'll get without it. Now, I'm not saying that this doesn't work without adding anything else. It does. It works very, very well, but I wanted to get the optimum and I like to experiment. So what I basically did is started adding potassium. Now, in my system, I have usually a relatively high pH. It sits about 7.5 and leverages between there. There is so many different sorts of potassium that you can add, and they'll usually all do the same sort of job, but I wanted one that wasn't gonna lift up the pH. So what I found was this one. You can't really see the name that much, but this is potassium nitrate. And along with being able to start bombs relatively easily, this stuff is fantastic for building up the potassium inside of the system. I did a bit of a trial and see how it goes method because I wasn't quite sure how much I needed. So there are potassium tests. I'll go grab one and show you guys what they look like. Now, what I have here is a potassium reef test, and it's basically used for testing the amount of potassium there is in a system. And it works really, really well. They just basically add a drop of this, add a drop of that, add some more of this stuff, and then you put in a little dropper until it gets to the color. It will change color to a nice bluish color, and when it gets that color, you know it's about right. Now, this test itself does not get down low enough for the area, but I discovered if you just keep on adding drops and taking it down by 10 parts per million each time, you'll get to the level that you want and you'll know how much potassium there is inside of your system. Now, there are some other things on the chart. There's phosphorus, there is those sort of things, but phosphorus I tested and I discovered there was not a deficiency at all. It was exactly as it wanted to be on that chart, so I did nothing for it. And the next one is nitrogen. Now, this one, it can be a little bit harder to actually manage inside of an aquaponic system because when you think of nitrogen, it's basically the fish pooping and the ammonia coming up and going throughout the system and getting converted into the nitrates. And the nitrates are pretty much through nitrogen. So when you look at the chart, when you see nitrates, just convert it to nitrogen, and that is the nitrogen parts per million. Now, tomatoes, if they have too much nitrogen in the system, will just put out a hell of a lot of leafy growth, which means they will have a lot of leaf, but not that much plant, which is not that much fruit, but that's not really what we want. So we want to keep the nitrogen relatively low, around the 20 parts per million side. And to do this, you can do it a couple different ways. If your nitrogen is usually a lot higher, then slow down the feeding of your fish, and that will pretty much do it. You can also overplant, so put really, really nitrogen hungry plants in it. So lettuce, basil, those sort of things, mint, will start sucking it all out there and leave less for your tomatoes, and then you get them as a side product. Now, some of this does work really, really well, but some of it does have some drawbacks. With that high of a potassium level inside of your system, then everything else is going to go to seed. I'll show you what I mean. So these are some of my lettuce plants, and that's pretty much what happens. They get to a certain point and then they just start shooting off and wanting to fruit and put out seeds. Now, another thing that's been thriving this year through the extra potassium has been strawberries. They have been going insane. They are just growing like I've never seen them grow before in my system. So I've had so much fruit out of this, so I am really happy with that. And another one has been cucumbers. Before the powdery mildew you get some, they have just been absolutely thriving in there, which I am very, very happy with. Now, I am going to say again, this is not needed. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. It's not saying tomatoes won't grow, but I've just discovered there is so much more sauce, and I'm not even talking about all the cherry tomatoes that I got, which are taking up all the beds. I'm just talking about plain sourcing tomatoes, and they have been growing like insane. And the same with the cherries. They have been growing gangbusters, and they are still going, but it is starting to cool down a little bit, as you can see from me in a long sleeve jacket, and they are not going to last that much longer. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you've got any questions, if you've got anything you want to add to it, then please ask me suggestions. And if you guys have any videos that you want to see me do, stuff you're curious about, then please let me know in the suggestions, and I'll do my best to make a video on that sort of stuff as well, because I can make 1,000 videos, but if it's not what you guys want to see, then it's going to slow it all down. So hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know if there's anything you want to see in the future. So thanks guys, and I'll see you guys next time.